This is the Colombia Calling podcast. I am your host, Richard Mccoll, here in Bogota, 2,600 meters closer to the stars. Our very special guest needs no introduction this week. He's been on dozens of times, it seems. No less than the director of Colombia Reports, Adriaan Alsema, there in Medellin. How are things going in Medellin, Adriaan?
Things are going pretty well.
Good stuff. You look well. You look
Thank
healthy.
You. I feel healthy, thank you.
There we go. It must be this cohabitation you've got with the other roving freelance journalist there, Joshua Collins.
Yeah,
comrades. He's keeping you on the straight and narrow.
No, the other way around, brother.
Very good.
I'm older.
Well, listen, it's an interesting one. I've had actually a couple of requests to do a podcast episode on this topic, and it's I'm going to title it the Petro Meltdown, but really, the meltdown was short-lived. But at the same time, it's a very important topic to discuss because it gets us to discuss where the government and the project of Gustavo Petro finds itself, and we're looking at, this will be March 2025. Where does it find itself in its final year and a tiny bit left? You've been thinking about this quite some, for quite some time. But perhaps we'll start with what took place at that very, very strange cabinet meeting, because I think that's the nice way to start before then getting into the crux of it all.
Yeah. Well, so Petro had the idea, and I was still really sympathetic to the idea to broadcast the Council of Ministers live on national TV. So the president has he can allocate time for addresses to the nation, where he does a speech, and this time he was like, no, we're gonna do the Council of Ministers live because this needs to be transparent.
Yeah,
which sympathetic. However, on that very day in the morning, it became clear that a rather controversial politician, Armando Benedetti, was appointed cabinet chief, and this position kind of put Benedetti in between the ministers and the president. And half of the ministers had gigantic problems with Benedetti because, one, he's been with every president since 2002. So he started off with Uribe, then he went with Santos, and now he's with Petro. He's got a Supreme Court investigation against him for corruption allegations. And he's an alleged wife beater. So particularly the feminists in the Petro cabinet, led by Vice President Francia Marquez, wouldn't have any of this appointment. And what ended up being broadcast was not much of a Council of Ministers, but rather an open fight in which all the feminists and leftists in the cabinet just bashed Benedetti for, well, all the things that may be wrong with him.
It was compelling watching. It was like the what was it on Seinfeld? It was called the airing of grievances.
It was great television.
And Susana Muhammad, the environment minister, and Vice President Francia Marquez, they have a very valid point. And the relationship between Benedetti and Petro's greatest confidant, it seems, Sarabia, that it can't be a good one either. Especially about all the issues Benedetti being when he was first put in as ambassador to Venezuela, which he didn't want. It was quite clear he didn't want that. I think he wanted Minister of Defense. I think that's what he originally wanted. But he's kind of like this weird chameleon. If I put it, but correct me if I'm wrong, well, Benedetti's from the Caribbean coast, and he is the one that ties up those votes. He's the go-getter and got Petro, the Caribbean's votes to get him elected to the presidency. So he feels, he feels as a central figure to the Petro presidency, the reason why he's here, right?
Yeah, well, because the Caribbean region has a large city like Barranquilla, which is where Benedetti is from. But it's also got a very peculiar political system, which is notoriously corrupt when it comes to getting votes. So that there was like one phone conversation leaked between Benedetti and Laura Sarabia, who is now where's Laura Sarabia again? She's foreign minister now.
I know, it's amazing.
Laura Sarabia used to be Benedetti's assistant when he was in the Senate. And she met Petro on the campaign in 2000. And since then, she's become like his closest confidant. But there's a lot of suspicion among the left of her role in the government, because like she's not a leftist like the people who voted for Petro or the majority in the cabinet. So at one point, Laura Sarabia and Benedetti fell out. I think this was last year, wasn't it?
Last year or the year before, but it was a Benedetti drunk phone call that was leaked, and he was viled in it. I mean, he was extremely vile.
He was suggesting that he got votes for Petro in a rather dirty way.
I don't doubt it, actually. I'll say that now out loud. But tell us about the coast. Tell us about the strange political system in Barranquilla and around.
Well, the coast, the Caribbean region has always been like a liberal region, but mainly like economically liberal rather than, well, it's also like socially quite liberal. But traditionally, like the Liberal Party was really strong in the coast because of the international trade coming out of Cartagena, Barranquilla, and Santa Marta. So what happened in the coast was that these liberal clans became extremely strong. And this got really corrupt in the 1980s when drug trafficking began financing all kinds of careers. And currently, like the most powerful clan on the Caribbean coast, the Char clan, also from Barranquilla, and also like from the liberal side of the political spectrum. They're currently the most powerful clan on the coast, and allegedly also have their roots in drug trafficking in the 1990s. So what's happened on the coast is that there have been like machineries for vote buying in almost the entire coast. So from Urabá in the northwest to Guajira in like the utter north. And these machines have become notorious, like and there's hardly any opposition to whoever wins office in any of those governor's offices or mayor's offices in that area. So getting votes from there, it's kind of difficult to get around the clan. And I curiously, like Benedetti has been moving around that like thing kind of like smoothly. So like I said, like he started off with Uribe, who is obviously a far right politician. Then he went to Santos, like who's a hardcore liberal, and now he's with Petro, who was like a convinced leftist.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of people suspicious about like how he gets his political clout, because it seems there's a lot of like wheeling and dealing going on, mainly for the benefit of Benedetti's career rather than the good of the nation.
So yeah, the Char clan, of course, and of course the affiliation to, well, it's now deceased, Gerlain as well. All these guys they controlled it. I mean, they control contracts, they control everything, and they hold. It's interesting because I remember talking to someone who actually worked for Ecopetrol high up in the Duque administration and of very, very much right of center. He said he would be voting in the last elections in the first round for the Char party, Chars, because they get things done. And I just said, well, at what cost? And he couldn't answer, because I said, the Chars and whoever have had all of these concessions to do things for Barranquilla and to lift and to change some of the social fabric of Barranquilla. but they don't do it. They do it just enough to keep people happy. So therefore, the Avenida del Rio, the Shakira thing, or redoing buying the right football player for Junior from Barranquilla, they do enough to keep the crowds happy, and then say, yeah, but they get things done. And it's like they could do actual proper things.
Well, and the problem is that a lot of the money that goes to Barranquilla just disappears. So the problem with particularly Barranquilla and the Char clan, like the Char clan own the football club of Barranquilla Junior. They also own a supermarket chain called Olímpica, which is one of the biggest in Colombia. They have their own bank. They have their own radio stations. They manipulate public opinion like rather easily. So
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to say if people in Barranquilla are happy or unhappy, because if they were unhappy, it wouldn't end up in the media, and it also wouldn't end up in the ballot box, because the vote buying machineries are extremely sophisticated there.
Yeah.
Like this became clear in 2018 when the prosecution raided one of the Char clan's offices. And the way the vote buying was done there was like really sophisticated with QR codes. So there's a real follow-up on if people actually did vote on what they said they would vote. It's extremely troublesome.
We digress somewhat, but that gives us the background into where Benedetti has, his loyalties lay, and how that gets us to Petro. So Benedetti is a controversial figure.
Because like Benedetti at one point was one of the founders of the U Party.
Mm-hmm.
Now the U Party, when it was founded, I believe 2005,
Yeah.
just before the 2006 elections.
Yeah.
The U, everybody kind of understood that the U at the time stood for Uribe. Like people understood it as like the Uribe Party.
Yeah.
But it was like actually the Unity Party.
Unidad Nacional or something.
Yeah,
Partido
or
de Unidad
social.
Nacional or something.
Yeah, whatever. So this party became like one of the main power bases in Congress that initially supported Uribe, and then later would support Santos. Like when Santos was president, and this is a problem this has become an issue now. The U Party was given custody of what was called the Financial Fund for Development Projects, which is like a government fund from which development projects are financed.
This is FONADE, FONADE.
FONADE, correct. And that became a U Party slush fund. Like two former U Party senators like Ñoño Elias and Musa Besaile, also from the coast, are currently in prison for all kinds of corruption scandals, but they were also involved in this one. And Benedetti was allegedly also linked to this like embezzlement of public funds. Well, he like to be exact, like he tried to benefit. He allegedly tried to benefit a specific company, like he was promoting like their bid for contracts.
Didn't Musa Besaile just get let out?
Oh, did he?
I think he might just be there. Hey, so he made us promise not to tell anyone that he moved hotels in Mompos because he stayed in a hotel and he saw the figure of a woman sitting at the foot of his bed like a ghost. So he moved to my place, and he made us all promise not to tell anyone because he didn't want to be seen as a coward. So there you go.
Well, aren't you the reliable confidant?
Hey, it's just a ghost story. I'm not talking about
so
the car.
Where were we?
Yeah.
So at one point in 2022, in 2021 already, like Petro was already moving large crowds, like in the second half of 2021.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the campaign. And in fact, he started off his campaign in Barranquilla. This was, in fact, before the campaign even started. And was able to gather a whole bunch of people from there, which totally took the opposition by surprise.
Yeah.
And obviously, in this whole process, like Benedetti was a key figure in making sure that all the Barranquilla elites were aligned and helping Petro get elected.
Mm.
And now there's talks among the left wing supporters of Petro that Benedetti is kind of blackmailing Petro into power. Like a lot of people don't understand why Benedetti is such a fixed person in the cabinet. Like,
Yeah.
despite like the growing scandals surrounding him.
It's a weird one. It's a weird one that he has to have some dirt on Petro or on the campaign. I also found it interesting that Petro's son, from the first marriage, was also put forward as a politician there in, what was it, for governor or for mayor in Barranquilla. So there was definitely movement.
Governor, yeah. Yeah, but he got burned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But so we got Benedetti, and we've got this weird, this very strange cabinet meeting, and it's the airing of grievances. But what we're seeing, I mean, this is following on from the international fracas between Petro and Trump via Twitter and Truth Social. So Petro seems to, stumble at the moment from one to the next. Petro then says that Benedetti is like, is it Batman? He then says he's like a revolutionary leader, which is curious and not going to win a lot of support on that one.
No.
And then,
because Jaime Batman was one of the founders of the M19
to which
guerrilla
Petro
movement.
belonged.
Yeah, a genuine revolutionary, and Benedetti is a lot but a revolutionary.
He's out for himself, Benedetti.
Yeah,
he's looking after number one. And then, that likeness was a strange one, because I'm not sure that Benedetti would have even liked that description. And then we had the protocol of asking for the resignation of all the cabinet ministers. It's not, for me, that's nothing new. That this happens. We've had more than 40 changes, obviously, up until this point. But people making a big scene about Petro asking his whole cabinet to resign, that's just protocol at this point. But
because like whenever there is, I've never seen this like in Europe where there's like parliamentary systems, but here, whenever there's like some kind of unrest in government, the government asks for like the protocolary resignation of the ministers, which allows them to keep some, get rid of like the people who are not helping the general project of the government, and kind of readjust like the strategy. So this time, like I believe 4 government ministers and 2 agency directors resigned without giving the president the possibility to reassign. So six like and some of like Petro's closest allies. You mentioned Mohammed, the environment minister, but Ivan Velasquez, the defense minister, also resigned. Cristo, the interior minister, resigned. These were like key people in the Petro government who enjoyed a lot of support from the public. Like Ivan Velasquez is a very, well, that man is a hero almost.
Yeah.
So is a long-time peace advocate. He's one of the authors of the 2011 Victims Law that gave all the victims of the armed conflict in Colombia right to compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Mohammed organized the COP16 quite successfully. Petro lost a lot of support from like the left wing of his government.
Mm-hmm.
In order to keep Benedetti, because multiple people in that cabinet meeting said that they wouldn't sit at the same table as Benedetti. Petro basically made the choice, well, okay, I'm keeping Benedetti.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the rumors that fly around of what Benedetti has on Petro and what Sarabia may have on Petro, because they're there. Now, is Benedetti Interior Minister now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a really important role in the government, because the interior minister is the main liaison between Congress and the government. So you will often find the interior minister in Congress trying to make deals with the individual congressmen and senators to negotiate their support for a government project in exchange for, well, you name it.
In exchange for slush funds from Fornade?
For example. So or slush funds for I don't know, the disaster agency UNGRD, which is
which,
another big scandal.
yes, another scandal. So under Santos, we called this the mermelada, but
Yeah.
it's now just barefaced.
Yeah, Americans have another word for it. Like mermelada is not, like, it kind of comes with the political systems we have. So people vote for congressmen that are that have like a debt, that are indebted to their region or their district. So these people, they go to Congress with the purpose of getting stuff for their region. So like, oh, we need a bridge, we need stuff. And then they meet with the minister, and the minister says like, oh, we need our budget to be fucking 700 billion, I don't know. And then the congressman says, well, that's great for you, like, I need a bridge. And then the minister says like, okay, you get the bridge, I get my budget. And this is how politics works. And there's been a weird misunderstanding of this practice, which is debatable ethically, but it's not necessarily corrupt, if you know what I mean. This is the whole point why we have people representing districts rather than political parties.
This, in the US listeners, it's the pork barrel, isn't it? That's what it's called. Pork barrel. Yeah. So you're getting something for something. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. I mean, whether you like it or not, it's politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people don't like it, but then again, a lot of people don't like politics, like, quite for this reason.
Yeah. So I mean, when I think of Petro, and I think of his approval ratings or disapproval ratings, and so on and so forth, and I think you get people like Benedetti in there to push them up and to get the votes in the where it counts. Petro will always have his, let's say, left to militant left 33% base. We know that. So he needs people like Benedetti in there to keep him in power. But this couple of weeks of negative headline after negative headline, could we say that we're getting into the stage where we can say that the Petro project, the key cornerstone projects of his government, are a failure, would you say?
Well, they're not going anywhere. And I think this is where Benedetti comes in. So, like, Petro started off with liberal ministers in his cabinet, like most prominently Alejandro Gaviria, like a big player like in the liberal camp in Colombia. These people weren't really on board with the change promised by Petro in the campaign. Like, Petro really wanted to change the healthcare system, public education system, labor, typical left-wing things. And the liberals just weren't very cooperative. So, like, in an earlier round of resignations, guys like Alejandro Gaviria were kicked out and replaced by like, well, leftists. So people from people from the M19 guerrilla group. Like, we've had until last week or 2 weeks ago, like, a communist labor minister. So Petro at one point thought that he was gonna get more done by having like leftists in his government, which apparently failed because like neither groupings, like the with the liberals or without the liberals, helped Petro get like his projects through Congress. Like, healthcare is stuck, pensions are stuck, everything is stuck in Congress because there's like significant opposition from the right against these typical left-wing policies. So what I think is that Petro, rather than trying to please his own base, mind you that he can't get re-elected in 2026, he is trying to get some results before he leaves office.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing we can jump in here, and we haven't mentioned him, is there is a similarity, albeit from two extremes, between President Duque's government and President Petro's government, because President Duque also came in believing that he was the savior and could change and tear up the peace accords, but he was a
And
president.
without Mermelada, so
Yeah,
like
and without Mermelada. But he was, he came in with a weak coalition that he needed to rule as a consensus president, which he didn't. And equally the same, Petro drinks his own Kool-Aid, comes in, thinks he's the savior, and he's going to unravel, 50 years or 60 years of the way politics has been run here and change it for the better. He comes in with a weak coalition as well, does not rule as a consensus president. There is a similarity here.
And because the political system has a few systemic issues, and that is Congress. Like one of them is like Congress. Like there are ways of getting people into Congress that are not getting votes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, or like buying votes or whatever. Like particularly the chamber, the House of Representatives is utterly corrupt.
Oh yeah.
So like these campaigns of the House Representatives are often paid for by weird slush funds that come from government contracts.
Mm.
And are basically a cycle of money, like and political power. The Senate is like a bit more reliable, although still extremely corrupt. So like whatever government, like whatever principled government gets into government, and well, you can say what you like about Duque, but he was a principled guy, same as Petro. They just won't get anything done because the corrupt elements within Congress just won't allow it.
So the useful politicians that you've brought in to vote blindly behind you. I mean, I could name half a dozen who come from various regions in the country and then suddenly have been voted in on spurious claims in outer-lying barrios of Bogota and so on. It's just like, what they are. They're the useful bodies.
Yeah, no, and particularly with organized crime, like having such like financial capacities to corrupt political systems, like this is a real issue in Congress. Like,
yeah,
particularly in the House of Representatives.
So everything's stalled, nothing's getting done, and one of the key things, obviously, cornerstone of Petro's presidency, and you know where I'm going with this, paz total peace. I mean, we can always argue, and it doesn't even need to be in hindsight, we can always argue that the ELN were never going to be easy at the table. Was it 8 different presidents, 7 presidents, and 8 different accords that they've sat down at, dialogues? And they're not serious when the first thing on their agenda is we need to change the capitalist system. I don't know how you even, it's ambitious to say the least. And the climate growth.
But it's why they took up arms. So like clearly, and the armed conflict has been quite beneficial to the ELN. Like right now, the ELN is stronger than it ever was. Like 4 years ago, it was also stronger than it ever was. And 8 years ago, it was also stronger than it ever was. So like I don't think people understand that the ELN are negotiating out of a position of strength.
Yeah.
And have very little motives to make substantial compromises.
Mm-hmm.
And this is difficult because they are like anti-capitalist, which, well, so am I. And it's clear that like through like normal congressional work, you won't be able to defeat capitalism. So the guerrillas believe that this needs to be done through armed struggle. And in all honesty, they're doing pretty fucking well.
They're as you say, they're the height of their power. expanding. And of course, what we're seeing in Catatumbo, obviously near the border with Venezuela, the expansion and strategic action to control that area from other armed groups. But I mean, we talk about their political aim to change the capitalist system, and that's why they took up arms in 1964 and so on. But we can say that while the older, let's say the crusty leftists in their secretariat or whatever you call it, they still have political aims, but largely this group has gone, like all groups in Colombia, political to criminal.
Well, yeah, but this is kind of a cliche argument.
Yeah.
Like you can't build up a guerrilla force with like legal commercial activity. You know, like it's not that the ELN can open a supermarket chain and finance their insurgency with arepas. You know, that this hasn't worked for the ELN. Like the ELN wasn't making legal money in the 1960s either.
No.
And the FARC weren't either, and the M19 weren't either. So like to say, like every president has always said that they've gone from like ideologues to criminals. Like this is a bit of a, you know, like yeah, like
They've
how
always
else
been
are you
criminal
going to?
on the end, yeah. I mean, they've always been.
Yeah,
What you say.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing so much on it's ELN for you, it's National Liberation Army or Ejército de Liberación Nacional, the largest group now, since a proportion of the FARC handed over their weapons and signed up for peace in 2016, ELN remains. But we've now got to think about the Clan del Golfo, or the Gaitanistas. So I would say several generations of offshoots of, well, original paramilitary groups, but they're now a multinational criminal organization, would you say?
Same argument.
Yeah.
But the problem with, because like what I think, like Santos also understood this, but he didn't like put his money where his mouth was. Like former President Juan Manuel Santos. Like there are a few very structural problems in Colombia, like in regions where there is no formal economy, like where people just literally can't eat unless they do something that effectively is illegal.
Mm.
And this is like the stomping ground of all these illegal armed groups, like be it the Clan del Golfo or the Ejército Gaitanista de Colombia or the ELN or the current generation of FARC dissidents. That they all hail and are powerful in regions where there simply has never been any investment in economic activity, in social development and whatnot. Like in many regions, there's not even paved roads. Like,
yeah.
And I believe that like both Santos and Petro understand that the only solution is like to get rid of that underdevelopment and make sure that people from those regions, that kids from those regions have access to education, have access to paid work.
Mm-hmm.
Like legal work, and that this will ultimately reduce the illegal armed groups to insignificant proportions. And without this, it's just difficult to negotiate with them because, like with the ELN, like they have really radical positions that are very difficult to compromise on.
You know, and both ELN, what are they called now? Nueva Marquetalia, Plan del Golfo,
Nueva Marquetalia also collapsed into two different groups.
Yeah.
So it's becoming incredibly complicated.
Mm.
But what all have in common is that they are really strong in areas that are just notoriously underdeveloped.
Mm.
Like even if they demobilize, like the next day, even this is also an issue at Medellin, by the way, which is like a developed city. So the current peace talks in Medellin have also come to the point where everybody realizes that we're not going to get anything done unless we build colleges in the barrios.
Mm.
And that the people in the barrios need to be able to get to work within a 1.5 hour commute.
Yeah.
rather than like 3 hours commuting. And if that isn't fixed, then you can demobilize every group, and then the next day there will be another group.
Yeah, I kind of think that way towards these. What's the one they said they were negotiating with the last couple of days? The Defensores de la Sierra Nevada or something like that.
Yeah, the ACSN.
I kind of think they just pop up when it's convenient.
Yeah. And they are able to expand like this, like recruiting no members is quite easy when everybody's unemployed.
Yeah. So, Petro, I mean, it was let's give him the benefit of the doubt in this first thing. As unrealistic as we may have felt when he announced Paz Total, it was refreshing to hear a new argument, a new discussion like we will obviously negotiate with all groups separately but parallel and get some out. There was hope, wasn't there? There was hope in those first months.
Well, and there's still hope. There's just no progress in the actual talks.
Yeah,
like the thing is that we tried war, that also didn't work. So clearly you're going to try to negotiate stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that also doesn't seem to work. So I think a lot of people are now like, okay, so how do you solve this? You know, like if negotiating leads to so little results and war doesn't lead to any results, then what are we gonna do? And I think this is like a point in time, like in where Colombia as a country finds itself, rather than this has to do with like I think Petro's proposal at the time made sense because of the time. Like now everything's different. Like all the guerrilla groups are splintered. You're dealing with urban organized crime groups that come from that originate from the paramilitary organization AUC, but also operate differently. And like there just needs to be also like an evolution in the proposals to solve these issues.
The one negotiation I see perhaps yielding fruit, if the government come in, when let's say infrastructure comes in, education comes in, health comes in, and they all come in at the same point, is that with the Comuneros del Sur. Is it Nariño? As far as I know from inside sources, they're very keen on signing up, but they're very worried about their own security.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's the Nueva Marquetalia that's moving in there.
Yeah. And no, it's the EMC actually.
Okay, so Estado Mayor Central. Okay.
So, but there's there's weird things happening there. Like there's a new paramilitary group in Nariño that strangely like targets only EMC. So there's like suspicions that the guerrillas, kind of like the Comuneros del Sur, who used to be with the ELN, that they created like a sort of like a paramilitary front group to weaken like the perceived enemy.
Wow.
Basically for their own security, because like if they are going to hand in their weapons, then we've all seen what happened to the FARC. We've seen what happened to the AUC. In the case of the AUC, more than 3,000 former members were assassinated. With the FARC, there are already more than 400. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's more than that. And in Catatumbo, they're going house to house.
Yeah. So it's really not very, like they're not being paranoid. Like this is a genuine concern that the government clearly doesn't know what to do with.
And only, we go back further, just look at the UP, the Unión Patriótica, the guys that turned it. I mean, that was André Gómez Suárez wrote his thesis and a book about it. It's a genocide of a political party. So
yeah, more than 6,000 people assassinated.
These fears are well founded. So it's a tough one. Some weeks ago, one of the favorite conversations I've had on this, was certainly this year anyway, was with an expert on the cocaine economy called Estefania Ciro Rodriguez, and she goes between Bogota and Mexico, and Caqueta. And she lives in Mexico, but she's Colombian, and she goes back and forth, and it's about the cocaine economy. And what I like the most is that she's veered away from, legalization and regulation and everything else. And she's just like, we have to just find a way of stopping killing one another. The Colombians stop. She's, let the Europeans kill themselves on our drugs, but we need to stop Colombians killing one another. And I think, it sounds so superficial, but then you realize how very profound that is, because it just keeps on going.
Yeah, and it's something where like killing has become customary also in politics and in crime, and there's like this gray area between politics and crime. Although it's not that gray if you're an anarchist.
Okay. All right. Well, you're my anarchist guest, so keep going.
Well, but there is like a culture of killing that's been going on. If you look at like the violence, for example, in Medellin, like the homicides in Medellin, like 4 out of 5 are between neighbors and among friends. Like these are not mafia killings, but just like where people just end up killing each other over something, and this must be part of the heritage of the armed conflict as well. Like this has been what's been going on since the 1930s.
Yeah.
So there should be like special care for like how are we going to deal with shit in a peaceful manner without ending up killing each other.
Yeah, but it's
and I believe like if we could go back to Petro, like I think Petro understands this, but has yet to formulate a functioning policy, like a policy that actually yields results. I believe he's doing okay, like with how the police is behaving. There have been, I don't think there have been any police killings, for example, like which is important. And I believe this will slowly allow Colombia to heal from all the violence that we've been through.
Yeah.
And make sure that we raise our children so that they don't end up killing each other.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it was refreshing. And to hear the president speaking to the military top brass and saying, you're not going to be judged on killings anymore. You'll be judged on saving lives. This is a vote fast. This is important. I do fear that he comes out of his presidency and it's seen as a, obviously the press here and obviously the opposition will paint it as a total failure. Hi, Joshua. We'll paint it as a total failure. But at the same time, we are learning from this. We are learning different angles.
Because when you say total failure, I kind of wonder how do you judge it?
Yeah.
Like Petro came in with a whole bunch of like great promises. And those didn't go anywhere.
No.
But I believe that we've definitely progressed in how we believe that the country ought to be governed. Like what kind of attitude we expect from a government in regards to opposition to government, like political opposition, like how protests are managed. Quite fundamental parts of democracy. And I believe that Petro in that regard has been exemplary.
Yeah, I really think, and this too is as obviously you've got Francia Marquez, you've got Gustavo Petro. Obviously, these two people are symbolically incredibly important in Colombia's political scenario. From prior to the elections, post-elections, we'll always say, and there's a certain degree of political maturity, a left-wing government coming in a predominantly, I would say, conservative country in its ways. I think, as you say, you talk about the sort of social aspect on that and how protests are managed and so on. I also think that we must look at it as like, we will look back on this and there will have been things, so much that we will have learned. I think even center right can look back at that and go, well, while they won't immediately when they get in, the public can also demand more of their politicians.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, political maturity or like decency. Mind you, I don't think Petro is like particularly like perfect in it. Like I think he often goes on about like, oh, the right this, the right that, blah 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 blah. You know, like all this like partisan bullshit. But it's certainly more verbal and not very violent or aggressive.
Yeah. From the pulpit, it's not, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He's not up where it felt far more violent, again, from the political stance in the previous government, and then of course previous to that. Obviously, there is an increase in violence in the countryside in these areas as these groups look to forge their control. But I think we have to just to look at what Petro's plan was, and why so much of it needed to happen. That's the other truth. I mean, you can't tell me at any point that Colombia didn't require healthcare reform, pension reform, labor reform. These reforms are needed. That's education reform. Unfortunately, he's promising everything and trying to do it all at once. And you sort of want to say, do one, do it well, move to the next one.
Yeah, but that's kind of boring. That's like saying like, oh yeah, well, like everybody will have a living wage in 200 years. Like that's not good enough for people.
No, it's not.
Like you don't win. I don't even think that's like. I mean, I think that's taking the piss if you do it like that. Like you gotta say like this needs improving, this, and that, and then you just push and see how far you go.
Yeah.
And the extent that you're successful kind of will determine your legacy.
I
suppose that, excuse me?
Do you think one of the drawbacks, of course, is that you're only having one term, the 1 4-year term, and not being able to build on it and say, listen, we did this, now next term we're going to do this?
No, I think that we should be increasingly focused on Congress, because like Petro, there's plenty of people on the left who can run for president and become president in 2026. But they'll be like if there's no like significant resources put in winning congressional elections as well, then that person is also not going to go anywhere because of what I consider basically sabotage by Congress, by corrupt elements that are not necessarily politically motivated. So I would argue that like the politicians that wish to operate within this system needs to stop focusing only on the president's office and make sure that they get a decent representation in Congress, and with that with that legislative force, see if like you can work with the government and the Congress and then get stuff approved. And this is where Petro came short.
There's also this issue that everyone thinks that the president can resolve everything. I mean, as you say, you need to work with Congress. It's very, is the word paternalistic? Is it that they think everything is done by the top guy?
Yeah. And everything that goes wrong is the blame of the top guy. Like we got to understand like how this specific political system that we're in, how this works. Like, and Congress is really important there. So we like if we want to claim that the past 4 years have been a disaster, then who is responsible for that disaster? Like, is that Petro or is this Congress? Like, or is this a shared responsibility? This people like are too easily are like, oh, the president this, the president that. Like maybe he had a shit finance minister. Maybe Congress is corrupt, or the court system is not up to date. I don't know.
But what else do you think? I mean, we could talk for hours, Adriaan. We've gone for a short while now. What do we think? We've discussed the Petro administration and what Petro has wanted to do, where he's fallen short. This issue of Armando Benedetti, Laura Saravia, he's not getting stuff done. Let's make some predictions for this final year and a bit.
Well, you said that a government should focus on one thing and get that done. I think this is like what Petro is going to try to do this time. Like he will want to finish his term with
Nothing.
something. Well, no, he wants to finish it
Oh, yeah.
with something as his legacy. And I think this is where Benedetti comes in.
Mm.
And then I think that Petro is going to be like busy in the international sphere, like doing stuff.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like leaving an opportunity for other leftists to keep the project going.
Mm. So, I mean, okay, so he's going to focus on perhaps some things, or one thing or two things that he can push past the finish line, that we say. Would you think that that's one of them might be the Comuneros del Sur, that group down there in Nariño? Another might be getting pension reform through?
Yeah, pension reform, and there's nothing, don't know, maybe the health reform.
I don't know. It's just got such opposition to it from the economic side of things, the economic interests in these tall buildings here in Bogota.
Yeah.
The people who inhabit them. I see healthcare just being such a thorny one. Again, the country needs it, but to get people to get out of their sort of comfort zone, it's a tough one, and to get the economical powers to step back and say, yes, for the greater good, we need to do this. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's not how the class war works.
No, that's not exactly how the class war works. So let's end up. We've got a lot of information in this. Let's end up. We could name 40 potential candidates on the right for the presidency. On the left, I've got Pizarro. Is it Mario Jose Pizarro? I've got
Ivan Cepeda.
I've got Gustavo Bolivar is always about. Who else would you think?
Alexander Lopez.
Interesting. All right.
And then you have this former Nariño governor,
Yes.
Romero.
Yes.
Also a very interesting character.
You think they can pull together? You think they can pull behind one candidate?
Well, if you look at how Petro did it with the support of a large number of social organizations outside of his like political party. Well, in fact, like his whole political party is made up of countless social organizations.
Yeah.
And I believe it's more that if anyone can inherit that of like mobilizing social organizations or community organizations, rights groups for the benefit of one candidate, then the left can just basically put in anyone.
Yeah, this is true. I have a side question for you, because we were earlier talking about the Char and their authority on the coast, their authority seemingly uncontested. There's a great journalist who wrote La Costa Nostra, about the Char family and the corruption there, Laura Ardila, and she's got a YouTube channel, and I imagine she is threatened daily, but especially after last week's one about the rising killing rates in Barranquilla. Are you in touch with Laura at all? No, I want to be in touch with her. So if anyone knows her out there, I want to be in touch with her.
Okay, I'll ask around.
Adriaan, anything you'd like to end on, or you think we've covered everything?
No, I hope you'll invite me back soon.
Yeah, we've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, because we still need to talk about the Uribe trial.
Yeah, it's coming up. I want to do a YouTube live. I would like to do that maybe around the time when all of the candidates have presented themselves, and see what kind of traction we can get on a YouTube live discussing that. It's kind of just an open conversation with questions popping up on the side. I don't know.
I'm down.
It would be interesting.
Let's try.
All right. Adriaan, thank you so much for your time. Everybody knows Adriaan Alsema, director of Colombia Reports. Check it out. Great reporting there, great editorials and so on. Adriaan's based in Medellin. I'm based in Bogota, but, we speak pretty frequently about what's going on, and we must do an Uribe trial episode. Maybe get someone else on as well, so we can have 3 people chatting. Maybe someone from let's say an opposing political view to discuss this. I think that would be interesting as well, to see how they can defend their favored candidate.
Or his criminal activity.
All right, let's leave it there on that one before I start getting hate mail. But yeah, it always comes in from the same sources. But at the same time, thank you everyone for listening. This has been episode 557 of the Colombia Calling podcast, speaking to Adriaan Alsema of Colombia Reports. It's been a really fun conversation, and we'll be back next week with a further episode about something Colombia related, or Colombia as a lens for a good conversation. So don't go away, share, support, get to us on Patreon, go to Colombia Reports on Patreon as well. The Indian media needs your help. That's me signing out, and goodbye.